Well, welcome to the Go Your Way podcast. I'm Greg Knieriemen and joined once again by Phoebe Goh and our very special guest. He's a repeat offender. He's been on here before, Mark Thiele. But Mark, there's been a little bit of a change. I see now that you're the founder and CEO of Edgevana. What in God's name is Edgevana?
Well, Edgevana is exactly what it sounds like. It's paradise at the edge. And being a repeat offender, does that make me just offensive now, or where does that place me?
Let's see what happens by the end of this podcast, so we can decide that.
All right. Yeah, no, I appreciate the question about Edgevana too. We're still in stealth, so I can't give away the whole story, but we're effectively trying to build a community for data centers that help enable access to existing infrastructure at the edge, making it easier for enterprises and others to develop solutions and deploy them globally on existing infrastructure, more cost-effective manner. So that's about as much as I can afford to give you right now, unfortunately.
All right. Well, I'll try to squeeze you throughout the podcast and see if we can get you to leak anything.
All right. My PIN code is.
Yeah, just what's your credit card number again?
Right.
Well, that's kind of an interesting topic actually that I wanted to talk about, which is, look, we're talking about data migration to cloud today, and I think that's something that is top of mind is security when you're doing those data migrations. But what else are you seeing going on right now with data migration? What kind of movement to the cloud, and what kind of things are customers trying to do in your experience?
Yeah, I'm really seeing a number of things. I mean, we all know the stories of folks that aren't doing much, right? And they're keeping it in their data centers, not because of it being any strategy other than unless the strategy is to avoid doing something. And then there are people that are trying to manage cloud as effectively as they can and keep the data speak of some other compliance or some other risk issue, or even the issues which we can talk about later. And then there are those that are wholeheartedly moving to their data into clouds. But I'm all of those, kind of one of the interesting dynamics within the edge. I mean, it's edge more the way Amazon or Google or Microsoft might define from an enterprise standpoint, which is like you put an Outpost or Azure stack on someone's campus on the edge. It's not really edge. That's just on-premises IT that's been defined and developed by one of the cloud providers. But the main point around data on-premise and the cloud providers is that all of the cloud providers are struggling to get more into their environments for all the reasons that we all know and love, or know and hate, depending on your perspective. And the kind of the middle ground opportunity for them to help solve that problem, the customer, but not kill the as a poor performance, kill because the customer want to put the data in their cloud, is how to cloud to the on-premises facility so that they can need it too. They can get the scalable, fast to deploy global infrastructure associated, but they can leave their data on premise and still enjoy a reasonable amount of performance associated with that, relatively close to the clouds.
It's interesting. The conventional wisdom is that as people migrate to the cloud, they want to reduce their footprint on premises. I kid you not, though. I am seeing, and just for context, and so people know I'm not crazy here. NetApp recently acquired a company called CloudJumper. And part of that value is the ability of allowing businesses of all sizes to remotely leverage cloud resources for workspaces and workstations for users, whether they're in a specific location or dispersed. And the interesting thing, and this is not about CloudJumper, but this is just a reflection. A lot of SMBs and medium-sized businesses now want to have a local copy of all their data on-prem, which to a lot of our friends in the industry would be like, wait, doesn't that totally defeat the whole value proposition around a cloud migration strategy? but the idea being is the safety net of having data at two locations and having that backup strategy include on-prem as one of those elements. And I'm not sure, just philosophically, if I'm aligned to that, right? Because obviously the resources that you're deploying in a public cloud should be able to span multiple regions to give you that level of data protection. But I think the thing is that for some companies that are new to cloud and first doing that cloud migration, it's still one of those things that they want a level of safety or guarantee, so they're architecting in place kind of because I don't know if it's truly hybrid, if it's just a backup of your data is local, right? It really is more of a construct of a data recovery strategy or the plan for a recovery strategy. And I'm wondering, Mark, how often? And again, it's not really the architecture of that. It's just the idea that as companies are taking their first steps into cloud, they're kind of hedging their bets a little bit about what they keep on premises and in the cloud. Is that a typical first step that you see?
Well, I don't know specifically if it's only associated first steps, Greg. I've actually seen that practice of leaving data on-prem used for several different methods or objectives, I should say. Some of the examples you gave were right on, and that's what I've been seeing as well, is that people are looking to just keep a redundancy, et cetera. But there are multiple reasons why data might benefit an organization being on-prem. If you're putting data in the public cloud, then you have an issue of having redundancy and availability. If you are planning on maintaining that level of redundancy and availability, which everyone would argue, anyone that's done any kind of cloud migration or architecting for use in the cloud will tell you that it's your responsibility to determine the best way to protect your data, whether it's in the cloud or not. Cloud companies provide you with mechanisms. Third parties can provide you with mechanisms, but you still have to pick something. It's just not automatically safer and protected just because you've put it in the cloud. And so one of the mechanisms for doing that is by having that redundancy in your own facility, kind of as a secret aside, you're having a synchronized of your primary data from the cloud on premise. Also have the opportunity of saying, screw the whole offloading the data cost. The data's all here already. I can just shut off what I've got in the cloud. I don't have to pay to extricate my own data if I decide to go to a different cloud provider or just cancel my cloud with that cloud provider.
I don't think it's just about exit strategy. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't think it's just about the exit strategy. I think it's actually the cloud strategy is that we're separating the apps from the data. And if the data makes sense in a certain place, then it should be there. I think, Greg, you've always said, right data, right time, right place. And I think it's part of that is sometimes an exit strategy is the right time, but sometimes it's just always the right time to have it on premises or to have it in a data center that's not in the cloud.
No, absolutely. And actually the final point I was just going to make, Phoebe, is that one of the biggest problems, and in fact, it's actually, we talked a little bit about talking about an issue someone had in their cloud migration or a success. One of the most issues with application migration versus migration and full environment migration is moving compute to the public cloud and moving the data to public cloud, and then realizing that the applications that remain on site are dysfunctional now because the latency between the on-premises applications and the public cloud is so high that maybe they don't all become unusable, but it's a real risk. And so, to me, those are kind of the scenarios that I mostly see. But Phoebe, your point is absolutely on.
No, it's interesting. It kind of surprised me, Mark, because look, how long have you and I known each other? How long have we been having this cloud migration conversation? It seems like every conversation comes down to this. I guess part of my own challenge is, and I can understand from an SMB perspective, right? There's a small or medium-sized business first taking those first steps into the cloud. but this seems like a more common practice. It just seemed to be that the natural thing would be just to replicate your data to another availability zone, and wow, there's your redundancy, but that still does not solve the applications issues that we've discussed and what that failover scenarios look like, or that cloud portability scenario that you've painted as well.
Right.
One thing I do want to promote on this episode is on June 18th. Mark, you're going to be joining us, and Phoebe is going to be joining us as well for a Ready, Set, Optimized for Cloud event that is going to be live streamed on YouTube and on LinkedIn. That's at 9 a.m. Pacific on June 18th. And it's going to be more of a community conversation. You're going to be giving us a keynote, Mark. And I will pull out of you today, if you can kind of just give us a sneak peek. We're always kind of looking at success stories and failure stories, kind of these worst case scenarios. And can I squeeze you, even though you won't give away any of your secrets of your new startup? Can you give away some of your secrets that buried in your past, of experiences that you've seen? Let's start off with a failed cloud migration or a less than optimal cloud migration.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number that certainly struggled. One of the biggest failures that I was with, I guess I'm in the sense that I can't or don't need to take a lot of credit for it. Certainly, I was there and saw a lot of what happened. It's a failure by the applications teams in really doing what I would consider to be full-scale equivalency testing of environment. And everything looked good in small scale, right? Whether it was, for 10 users or 20 users or even 100 users, small with the existing application, et cetera. But the trick with IT applications is that oftentimes, whether it's because more people or the actual size of the data set makes a difference to the performance application, or whether the application had some specific benefits by having 1 meter long cables between it and the data versus how it was distributed out environment, et cetera, et cetera. But because they didn't do a full scale test, they had about 100 internal consultants who almost exactly when they needed it most had their performance cut in half, and they lost about about 35, 40% of their revenue that they would have recognized that quarter was missed until the next quarter. Luckily, they still get to recognize most of it. It's not like total lost opportunity, but you can imagine all these people calling in, frustrated, poor performance, not able to numbers in, worried about getting their piece of the pie for the work that they did that month, et cetera, et cetera. And it took a lot of work in replicating the problem and several months before they could try the effort again. And the second time they tried it was much more successful. But, I've had a lot of strange things in IT environments when I'm building for infrastructure and applications. And almost without exception, if I can't at scale, I'm not willing to sign off and say that I'm okay with going live. And a cloud environment, while the clouds are designed extremely well, I would never take a deal from Microsoft and Amazon and say they weren't. There's still a big difference between hand-picked CPUs, hand-picked storage arrays, hand-picked flash drives, hand memory, scale of memory, all meter of each other, and distributing something at scale over a cloud environment. It's a very different deal.
And how often do we see that in enterprise tech in general? Forget about cloud migrations. Scale is hard. Application scale, even if it's on-prem or in cloud, scale period is hard. And I think it's one of those, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mark, because I think that's, I still think there's a lack of appreciation of doing anything at scale versus, building a low-level, small-level test environment to prove out, you really do need the right resources to be able to test at scale in advance.
Right. Right.
Oh, totally. And being able to review that, right? Like knowing what's where that is. If the bigger you grow, the harder it is to see where that problem might lie. And, to your point, Mark, having to do a lot of testing to actually even find that root cause, because now it's a big problem. It's not just a POC or a pilot or a small dev environment. It's all your users. So you've got that much more to try and sift through that noise.
And I would say, Phoebe, too, this is obviously the importance of monitoring tools, right? That can be able to give you some of those insights, and so you can understand where those resources are leveraged, where the bottlenecks for those resources are, and where those potential issues are. Being able to have a good read, a dashboard of what's going on in your on-prem environment or your cloud environment, and be able to optimize accordingly is a big piece of this as well.
Yeah, I'd even say it's beyond monitoring, because the more items you get, the more objects that you have to monitor, that's more noise. And so we're starting to go beyond that. Okay, I need to monitor every single possible thing that could go wrong, and just say, hey, I need to know what are the problems and what do I need to do to fix them so that I can get to that so much faster, because we don't have time in this day and age to do this root cause analysis of hundreds of thousands of objects in a cloud provider. And especially, elastic scaling cloud provider, it could be anywhere in that global environment. It just gets way out of hand. So monitoring is good. And I totally say, yes, definitely monitor everything. But it's the knowing what is it actually monitoring for? Where am I actually going to get looked at?
The point, and I actually learned that the hard way, even standpoint, is you're naive and dumb when you're paying attention to a thing, blinded the noise and the red blinking lights. And so able to discern the important issues from those really critical. And in an application environment, I mean, two of the companies I'm working with as an advisor exemplify what it is we're about, I believe. One of them looks for anomaly detection and resolution opportunities, and another one looks for issues of capacity and demand based on AI trending of your environment and usage characteristics, et cetera, help the second one not need to be used, right? So it's like, oh, if I know what might be coming from the network, then Phoebe will know what to add to the network. On the other hand, if they're all together that's unforeseen, then identifying it based on, whether it's an air conditioning unit or a CPU that's overheating or a memory that's not working or disk that's spinning too much or whatever it is, and then provide resolution or moving the workloads onto more successful. I think this is a point, that may be worth a discussion at some, because I think and Burkert would be a great one to get on if he'd be interested, because he's great at the whole black box thing. But we are getting bigger and bigger boxes. There's the kind of the good bird shoulder, or the bull or good shoulder or whatever as well. It's a black box because we don't want Phoebe and Mark to be building servers. We don't want Phoebe and Mark to validate every piece of code. We want the system to do that. But then there's the bad one that says, just give me all your stuff. When it goes wrong, don't call me. You're on your own. And so I think we've come a long way in tooling and platforms to look at how the black box is working, but we still have some ways to go. And that's what I'm excited to work with some of the startups do, because I think it's just a vital ability for us to sleep at night.
Oh yeah, and I'm all for black boxes. When I was starting in tech, I wanted to build the black box. I wanted to be in there. But as more and more technology comes out, I've been playing with Azure Bot Framework. There's a lot of companies out there doing kind of making it simpler for us to build things so that we don't have to go into the weeds and then really understand how they'll work. Sure, you can, but we're able to get outcomes much faster. And I think that's part of the the value of cloud and PaaS is being able to get to your business value much faster because you don't have to worry about black boxes. But then somebody has to monitor them and they have to know what's going on with them. So,
right.
yeah, it's a fun conversation.
And we should save that conversation for our Ready, Set, Optimize for Cloud event that we're going to have on June 18th. One other quick plug, 9 a.m., June 18th. Mark, in the meantime, how can people stalk you online?
Well, I'm overly active, like almost on steroids, on LinkedIn and Twitter. I love conversation. I love testing my assumptions. So in either place, mthiele10 on Twitter, or my profile, Mark Thiele, on LinkedIn. You can find discussions that I'm having about anything from ed to data, cloud option, and DevOps, and everything in between, IT leadership, being a CIO, et cetera, et cetera. And I love conversation, and I learn something new every day from the community. And if you really hate talking about current events, then maybe don't follow my right moment, because I have to admit that I am heavy on Twitter events. I'm an incredibly overly empathetic person, and so if I don't want to actually reach out and hug you, it's because I'm trying to find a knock your head off. So it's like I'm somewhere in the middle all the time. So appreciate that.
Understood. And I'll just say it from a personal reflection perspective, I think everybody should follow Mark. I learned something from you, Mark, on a pretty regular basis. And periodically, you and I even ping each other behind the scenes of if I've got a question or a concern about something. So you're also a great resource of information. Phoebe.
Thank you.
We need more information. How can people give us 5-star reviews on our podcast?
Well, you could follow our podcast and subscribe on all the favorite podcast listeners, iTunes, Spotify, and Apple and Google Podcasts. And we are also on YouTube, which is why we are now on video. Yay. So definitely subscribe to the NetApp channel and give us a like. Make sure you like ours because we have the best videos.
Yes, that's right. All right, fantastic. And Mark, can't wait for our event again, June 18th at 9 a.m. Pacific. Looking forward to it. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.